Hi, my name's Daniel. On Christmas Day, my wife dumped a plate of food on my 9-year-old son's head in front of everyone. Her parents didn't flinch. No one stopped her. Then she threw us both out of the house I bought. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just picked up my son's coat, took his hand, and walked away. 15 minutes later, they began scrambling because of one thing I did. You want to know what that was? Then you need to hear everything that led up to it and what came after. There was a time this house felt like mine. I remember the creak of the steps, the scent of pine from the candles we bought together, the way my son would dart through the living room with his socks sliding on the polished hardwood floors. But tonight, as I pulled into the driveway with my boy beside me and the snow falling gently onto the windshield, it felt like we were guests, not family. The lights were glowing from every window. Wreaths hung perfectly centered on each one. It looked warm, safe. But inside, it was something else entirely. "You ready?" I asked, glancing at my son. He nodded, his cheeks pink from the cold, eyes lit up with that Christmas wonder that only kids seem to hold on to. We stepped through the front door. The smell of roasted ham, nutmeg, and cranberry sauce hit us like a memory. Holiday music played softly from the Bluetooth speaker near the tree. My wife, in a red knit sweater, was arranging wine glasses at the dining table. She didn't look up right away. "Dinner's almost ready," she said, voice clipped. No hug, no kiss, not even a smile. My son stood still beside me. I reached down, brushing a wrinkle from his shirt. "Be careful with the gravy, all right? This shirt's new." He grinned. "I will, Dad." He trusted me to keep the night steady, peaceful, good. I wanted to believe I could do that. We hung our coats and settled in, though it didn't feel like settling. I glanced around. The table was already set for 8, but I saw only 6 names on the place cards. Ours weren't among them. The front door opened again. Her parents arrived like they owned the place. Her father took off his gloves slowly, scanning the room without smiling. Her mother barely acknowledged us, offering a tight-lipped nod before air-kissing her daughter. They chatted about the roads, about a neighbor's Christmas display. My name didn't come up once. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the kitchen island while they laughed about some vacation I'd never been invited on. My son clung to me more than usual. He could feel it too, that quiet rejection, the way conversations floated just out of our reach. I'd spent years learning to ignore that kind of thing. Told myself, don't stir the pot. Don't ruin the holiday. You're just being sensitive. It's Christmas, for God's sake. Let it go. The dining room filled with warmth, the kind that never touched me. Plates clinked and laughter echoed through the walls. I led my son to the table, finally noticing there were indeed 2 extra plates set, on the folding table, near the corner, away from the chandelier. We sat. No one said anything, not even a joke about the kids' table. Just silence. My wife served the adults first, then walked over with a plate for my son. I watched her hands, too steady, too intentional. My boy thanked her. He always had good manners. She didn't respond. She just turned, fetched another plate, and looked at me. I offered a faint smile. She didn't return it. We began to eat, or they did, rather. I picked at my food, keeping an eye on my son. I noticed her father watching him, brows furrowed. I wasn't sure what about him could possibly deserve scrutiny. He was polite, quiet, and trying so hard to blend in. Then came the first remark. Her mother, reaching for the wine, said softly but clearly, "You really should have cut his hair before tonight. Looks untamed." I froze. Not a direct insult, but sharp enough. I looked at my son. His smile faltered for a moment. I said nothing. What was I supposed to say? He's 9? Mind your damn business? No, I bit my tongue, because that's what I did. I'd done it for years. I convinced myself that holding my peace was the price of stability. I told myself I could absorb these small humiliations if it kept things from falling apart. I cut into the ham. I chewed. I swallowed. And I told myself it was fine. Then I saw it. My wife stood, plate in hand. The weight of it shifted as she turned, slow, deliberate. The room grew oddly quiet, like a held breath. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even pretending anymore. My son reached for his cup, oblivious. I reached halfway across the table, unsure why, unsure what for. Something just felt wrong. That plate in her hands, it wasn't just food. It was a warning, a promise, a threat. I remember thinking, if this was the worst thing that happened that night, I could live with it. And that's when she lifted the plate.
She lifted the plate with both hands, one slow, deliberate motion, and for a second, I still thought maybe she was just going to move it to the other side of the table, that maybe she saw something on it she didn't like, that maybe I was imagining it all. But then, without a word, without even looking directly at me, she turned and dumped the entire plate of food onto my son's lap. Gravy, mashed potatoes, roast, green beans. All of it hit him in a heavy, wet thud. The plate clattered against the edge of the table and stayed there, rocking slightly. A piece of ham slid off his leg and onto the hardwood. He didn't react right away. Neither did I. The room was completely still. I could smell the rosemary on the meat, the sharp tang of the cranberry sauce now soaking into his shirt. The same one I'd straightened less than an hour ago. My son blinked once. His hands were frozen in place, one still half reaching for his cup of water. He looked down at his lap, then back up. Slowly. I heard him whisper, barely loud enough for me to catch. Did I do something wrong? And that was it. That one line gutted me. I looked around the table. Her parents were still seated, their faces unmoved. Her father was slicing his ham. Her mother sipped her wine. Not a flinch, not a gasp, nothing. I looked at my wife. She stood there with her empty hands, not shaking, not remorseful, just watching my son like he was something she couldn't stand the sight of. "Get out," she said, her voice cold and clear. "Get out of my house, both of you." My jaw clenched. I hadn't said a word yet, hadn't moved. My son looked to me again, and for the first time that night, I realized he wasn't just confused. He was waiting to see what I would do, waiting to see if I'd protect him, if I'd stand up, or if I'd sit there like everyone else. "You heard me," she said again, louder this time. "Get out, and don't come back. I'm done pretending this is a family." Still, no one said a word. Her parents didn't even look at me. They just kept chewing. as if this was normal, as if it was deserved. I reached for a napkin, not to clean the mess, but to give my boy something to hold. His small hand gripped it like it was the only thing solid in the room. He hadn't cried. Not yet. "Come on," I said softly, standing up and helping him to his feet. His pants were soaked. His shirt stuck to his chest. I pulled off my own jacket and draped it over his shoulders, covering the worst of it. We walked toward the door, my hand on his back. I could feel him trembling, not from the cold, but from something worse, the kind of hurt you can't name yet. At the doorway, I turned around. Her mother was reaching for the salt. Her father was dabbing his lips with a napkin. My wife was already back at the table, as if nothing had happened, as if removing us was the same as clearing a dish. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I didn't demand an explanation. What would be the point? But something in me shifted right then. Some old, quiet part that used to make excuses for people like them. People who wound you and call it discipline, who humiliate you and call it boundaries. Finally, went quiet. I held the door open for my son. We stepped out into the cold, the snow still falling, soft and steady. Our footprints were the only thing marking we'd ever been there. He looked up at me. Can I still open the gift I made for her? I didn't know what to say, so I said the only truth I could find in the moment. "Not tonight, buddy." He nodded, like he understood more than I wished he did. I buckled him into the passenger seat. The warmth from the car's vents didn't come fast enough, but I let the silence fill the space between us. Some silences need to stretch before they break. I pulled out of the driveway slowly, careful not to look back. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew if I did, I'd see that same table, that same light, and the same people who let it all happen without saying a single word. And I wasn't sure I could ever forgive them for that. I didn't raise my voice. But as I looked around that table, I understood something had just ended, and nothing they said next would fix it. I reached for the doorknob without glancing back, still feeling the heat of their silence behind me. The handle felt colder than it should have, even for winter. I held it steady for a beat longer than I needed, just long enough to make sure my son was by my side, still holding that crumpled napkin like a lifeline. We stepped out into the night together. The cold met us like a slap, but I welcomed it. It cleared the fog that had started to creep into my thoughts. The air was sharp, the kind that made you breathe deep, whether you wanted to or not. Christmas lights blinked from the neighboring houses. Strings of warm white and candy-colored bulbs draped neatly over eaves and fences. Cheerful, out of sync with the night we were walking into. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back to see if anyone was watching, but I knew they were. Her parents always watched. We made it down the steps without a word. I adjusted my coat around my son's shoulders again, tugging the collar up to his chin. He stayed close, closer than he'd ever needed to before. His voice was quiet, unsure. "Are we going to Grandma's now?" I crouched beside him, brushing a smear of gravy off his sleeve. "Not tonight, buddy. She's probably asleep by now. We'll figure it out, okay?" He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. Behind us, the porch light stayed on. The front door hadn't moved. No one followed. Not to explain. Not to apologize. Not even to close the door. That told me more than any speech could have. I stood up and looked at the house. My house, technically. The one with my name on the mortgage. The one I'd painted myself the summer after we got married. Now it looked like someone else lived there. Someone I didn't recognize. That house wasn't home anymore. I felt the shift happen. Not like a light switch, but more like a slow settling of something that had been moving for years. A decision, silent but solid, rising up from somewhere I hadn't touched in a long time. This wasn't about anger. It wasn't even about pride. It was about my son. About showing him what it looks like when a man draws a line. I opened the car door and helped him in, careful not to bump the mess still clinging to his pants. As I reached across to buckle his seatbelt, I glanced back at the porch. Her parents were standing behind the screen door now, still watching, still not saying a word. Her father with his arms crossed. Her mother holding a wine glass like it was some sort of shield. Their silence wasn't confusion. It was consent. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a moment that got out of hand. This had been simmering for years. Their daughter hadn't snapped. She'd acted out something that had always been allowed, encouraged even. And I'd let it happen. I'd kept quiet for too long, thinking that keeping the peace was the same as protecting my family. But all I'd really done was hand them a script and let them write me out. As I closed the door, the click of the latch felt final. I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The heater coughed to life, pushing lukewarm air into the cab. My son pulled my jacket tighter around himself and leaned against the window. He didn't ask another question. He didn't cry. I could feel him watching me from the corner of his eye, trying to understand what came next. I didn't answer out loud. I didn't say a word. I just drove. Slow, steady. Past the houses with wreaths and garland and inflatable Santas, past the mailboxes with ribbons and the driveways full of visiting family. I drove because I needed space to think. I wasn't going to react, not the way they expected. I wasn't going to storm back in and demand justice or dignity or my place at that table. I wasn't going to raise my voice because they'd already decided what they wanted to hear. Instead, I would do something they'd never see coming. I'd stay quiet. But this time, not out of fear. Not out of submission. This time, silence would be my strategy. I'd let them believe they'd won. I'd let them believe I'd crawled away wounded. Because when people think you're broken, they stop watching their backs. And when they stop watching, that's when you move. As I buckled my son into the car, I realized they thought this night was over. But for me, it had just begun. I pulled away from the house slow, careful not to wake the neighborhood or jar my son more than he already was. He sat quiet in the back seat, his head against the window, watching the wreaths and blinking lights smear past in red and green blurs. I didn't turn on the radio. We didn't need noise. We had enough of it earlier, even if none of it came in the form of yelling. The further we got from that block, the lighter my chest felt. But it wasn't relief. It was distance. I'd mistaken the two before. He finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "Are we in trouble?" I glanced at him through the rear view. He looked smaller than usual, not just because of how he curled into himself, but because of how much of him I couldn't fix in that moment. "No," I said gently. "You're not in trouble." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't quite buy it. He stared back out at the snow-dusted sidewalks. I didn't know what hotel we'd land at. I just kept driving west, away from that street, away from that table, that door, that silence. Eventually, a modest chain hotel popped into view, 3 stories, half-full lot, wreath on the front desk window. It'd do. Inside, the clerk didn't ask many questions, just slid me a key and said, "Hot cocoa in the lobby till 10. The room was basic. 2 double beds, a lamp with a crooked shade, a TV bolted to the wall. I helped my son out of his coat, peeled off his gravy-stained shirt, and handed him one of my old sweatshirts from the overnight bag I'd grabbed months ago and never unpacked. He didn't ask any more questions, just crawled into the bed by the window and pulled the blanket to his chin. I sat at the edge of the other bed, phone in hand. 5 missed calls, 2 voicemails, 3 texts, all from her. This isn't how families solve things. You're being dramatic. Come back and talk like an adult. She hadn't said a word when she dumped a plate on our son, but now she had plenty to say. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I set the phone face down on the nightstand and walked to the window. Cars passed now and then. A plow moved through the lot, slow and steady. From behind, I heard soft breathing. My son had finally fallen asleep. For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe, that was it. Maybe we'd crossed a line and now there'd be space. Cold, distant, maybe even painful, but space. I was wrong. The next buzz came around 11 p.m., a new message, this time, different tone. We've told the kids you lost your temper. They were scared. We're all worried about your state of mind. Worried. That word always shows up right before someone tries to take control of your narrative. I sat back down on the edge of the bed, read it again, then again. It wasn't about fixing anything. It was about shaping the story before I could. For years, I'd thought staying quiet was how you earned peace. That if you didn't make noise, you didn't invite chaos. But silence, real silence, is a vacuum. And people like her parents, they fill it, they twist it, they use it. Suddenly, I understood. This had never been about Christmas, or dinner, or even the mess on my son's shirt. It was about control, about them writing the script and assigning me a role I wasn't allowed to step out of. And I had stepped out, not with shouting, not with slamming doors, but with calm, steady refusal. That terrified them. I scrolled back up to her messages, read each one with new eyes, each word a brick, quietly rebuilding a wall between me and the truth. She thought I'd come crawling back. She thought I'd explain myself. She didn't realize I'd already said everything I needed to say by leaving. I looked over at my son. Even in sleep, he looked guarded, like he didn't trust the world not to shift under him. And that's when it hit me. Staying quiet wasn't enough. Not anymore. Because when you don't tell your own story, someone else will. By morning, it was clear my silence hadn't ended the conflict. It had invited them to push harder. 5. The room was still dim when I opened my eyes. It took me a few seconds to remember where I was. The muted colors, the unfamiliar hum of the heating unit, the faint scent of overused carpet cleaner. Then it hit me. All of it. The weight didn't settle gently. It dropped, like someone set a cinder block on my chest. I turned my head slowly. My son was still asleep in the other bed, curled tightly under the blanket. His arm stuck out slightly, clutching the sleeve of my sweatshirt like a tether. That alone told me how shaken he still was. He used to sprawl when he slept, arms open, body relaxed. Not last night. I slipped out of bed without waking him. The floor was cold even through my socks. I sat on the edge, back to him, and picked up my phone from the nightstand. 6 new texts, 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail. The first message was from her. Please don't drag this out. Come home and talk. The second followed fast. You made this more dramatic than it needed to be. Then the shift. You scared the kids. Mom is really shaken by your outburst. This isn't what healthy men do. There it was, the shift. I wasn't a father defending his child. I was a man who had, supposedly, lost control. And just like that, the narrative was slipping out from under me. I didn't reply. I scrolled, numb, until I saw a screenshot sent by a mutual friend, a social media post. Prayers for peace in our family this Christmas. Sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is protect her children, even when it hurts. Her name was tagged. So was mine. The comments were already piling up. You're so brave. Men like that don't change. We love you. Stay strong. My throat tightened, not from shock, but from recognition. I'd seen this dance before. Quiet men don't get the benefit of the doubt. They get rewritten. I set the phone down and stared at the floor. From the other bed, a soft voice broke the silence. Did I do something wrong? I turned slowly. He was sitting up now, hair messy, eyes still heavy with sleep. No, buddy, you didn't. He blinked a few times. Then why did she pour food on me? I took a long breath and walked over, sitting beside him. I wanted to explain it perfectly, gently, but there was no perfect answer for a 9-year-old who just had his dignity stripped at Christmas dinner. Sometimes, I said slowly, people hurt others because they don't know how to deal with their own feelings. But that doesn't mean it's your fault, ever. He didn't say anything else, just leaned into me. I wrapped my arms around him, pressing my cheek to his hair. That should have been the end of it, but I knew better. Later that morning, I took him out for breakfast. Nothing fancy, just a diner off the highway with decent coffee and pancakes shaped like snowmen. We sat in a corner booth. I let him pick chocolate chips. He smiled, finally. While he colored a paper placemat, I checked my phone again. A voicemail. From her. I listened, barely breathing. This is getting out of hand. People are talking, and it's making things worse for everyone. If you care at all about this family, you'll stop making it look like you're the victim. You're scaring people. There it was again. Scaring people. That word, spoken softly but intentionally, wasn't random. It was planting seeds, preparing for something worse. A custody shift? A character attack? I didn't know yet, but I knew this much. Every second I stayed silent gave that narrative more room to grow. After breakfast, I stepped outside to take a call from a friend, someone close enough to know better than to believe what they read online. Hey, he said, just so you know, there's a version of this going around where you stormed out in a rage and traumatized the kids. I didn't want to believe it, but it's out there. I thanked him, told him the truth, briefly. He listened, believed me. But the damage was already moving faster than my words could catch up. When I got back to the car, my son was in the back seat, playing a game on my phone. He looked up and said, "Grandma told me last time that men who yell aren't safe." I paused at the driver's side door, hand on the handle. "I didn't yell," I said. "I know," he replied, and went back to his game. But the line had already been fed to him, planted. I sat there behind the wheel, keys in my hand, the engine off. My heart thudded slow, but heavy. That was the moment I cracked, not with rage, but with a quiet collapse I didn't see coming. I asked myself questions I didn't want to ask. Should I have just kept my mouth shut that night? Was all this worse than swallowing it again? Had I failed him by trying to do it differently? The truth didn't come in a rush. It settled over me, heavy and absolute. If I stayed quiet now, I wasn't protecting him. I was handing him over to a version of reality where men like me were always dangerous, where silence made guilt seem true. And that's when something shifted. I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't post or threaten or scream, but I would speak. Not for them, for him. That was the moment I understood. Staying quiet wouldn't save my son, and speaking carefully would. 6. The thought landed quietly, but it didn't leave. They thought I was silent because I was scared. They didn't realize I was clearing the space for my next step. I rose slowly, careful not to wake my son. The hotel room was warm, a small contrast to the frozen parking lot outside, but the tension in my body had cooled overnight. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't replaying the dinner scene. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was awake in a different way. I brewed the small cup of motel coffee, pulled a granola bar from my bag, and placed both on the table by the window. I opened the curtains halfway. The lot was quiet, a few trucks still idling. A snowplow passed in the distance. My son stirred. "Is it Christmas?" "It is," I said, turning to him. "And I think Santa might have left something in your bag." I'd tucked a comic book and a pack of sour candy into the side pocket of his backpack last night while he slept. It wasn't much, but when he pulled it out and grinned, it felt like enough, for now. We sat on the bed and ate quietly. No music, no tree, no stockings. But he didn't ask about any of that. He just leaned into my side and read. Later, when he was in the shower, I stepped out into the hallway and made a call. Not to her, not to anyone in her family. To a lawyer. A friend of a friend, someone I'd never had reason to contact before. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, I don't need advice," I said. "I just want to understand something. If things escalate, what does it take to make sure I have a voice?" She didn't ask what happened. She just listened, then told me what documents I'd need, what timeline to expect. She mentioned restraining orders. I said I wasn't there yet. She respected that. I hung up. That was the first move. No announcement, no warning. Just the start of a plan. By the time we checked out, the text messages had picked up again. "We need to figure this out now. You're being ridiculous. This is not what a father does." No mention of our son. No apology. Just control wrapped in concern. I didn't answer. Instead, I took him to a public library that was open for limited hours on the holiday. We sat together, built a Lego snowplow on a table in the children's area. He was quiet but steady, his usual chatter slowly returning. I scanned the room for anyone familiar. No one. Good. He didn't ask why we weren't home. I think he understood more than he said. On the drive back to the parking lot, my phone lit up again. A voicemail. I let it roll to the end before playing it. Her voice was clipped. "I don't know what story you're telling people, but we're done playing nice. If you want to see your son again on our terms, you'd better start acting like a parent, not a victim." It wasn't a threat, not exactly. But it was the kind of message someone sends when they think you're still boxed in. When they think you'll fold. Like always. I pulled into the motel lot again, not the same room as last night, but another one just like it. We weren't hiding. We were waiting. While my son curled up on the bed with his comic, I wrote a message, not to her, to someone else in her world who had reach. Her uncle. He'd seen me over the years, seen the way I bit my tongue, watched how I carried weight that wasn't mine. "You don't owe me anything," I wrote, "but I thought you should know what's being said and what really happened. I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm just giving you a full picture." I attached a photo from Christmas Eve, just before things went bad. My son, smiling, wearing his buttoned shirt, the one he later had to peel off, soaked in gravy. No anger, no accusations, just quiet clarity. I hit send. And then, I did nothing. That was the shift. They were still reacting. They were still scrambling to control the version of events that made them look clean. But I'd stopped responding to their story. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was moving, calmly, quietly, without letting them know the direction. It felt unfamiliar at first, this version of me that didn't rush to fix, to smooth over, to absorb the impact. But it also felt honest. I looked over at my son, asleep again, his hand resting on the comic book cover like he was holding on to the part of the day that felt normal. I wasn't going to let them take that from him, let them misread my silence, let them interpret stillness as retreat. I wasn't disappearing. I was choosing the place and time where the truth would land. They thought I was backing down. But in reality, I was making room for the truth to land. 7, I didn't feel relief after that realization. What I felt was stillness, the kind that comes right before a storm you didn't start but know you'll have to stand in. By mid-afternoon, the tone shifted again, not louder, sharper, more careful. A message came through from her mother, sent to a group thread that included extended family and a few mutual acquaintances. It was written like a church bulletin announcement, measured, polite, heavy with implication. "We're deeply concerned," it read. "Christmas was difficult. Emotions were high. We're praying that everyone involved gets the help they need." Help, that word again, always wrapped in gentleness, always pointed in one direction. Within minutes, replies followed. Short ones, awkward ones, the kind people send when they don't know what to believe but don't want to look heartless. "I hope everyone's okay." Sounds stressful. Let us know if we can support. Support for whom was never clarified. I closed the thread and put my phone face down on the table. My son was in the next room, building a puzzle on the carpet. I'd turned on a cartoon he liked, not because he was watching it, but because the noise made the space feel safer. I stepped into the hallway and called the front desk, asked if we could extend our stay another night, paid without hesitation. Stability mattered more than comfort. When I came back in, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail this time from her father. He rarely called me directly. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "We're just trying to make sure everyone's safe," he said. "There are concerns. People are worried about your behavior. It might be best if you take some time to cool off and let the family regroup." Regroup. As if my son were an item misplaced during a holiday meal. I listened to the message twice. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to hear what wasn't said. No mention of the plate. No mention of the stain. No mention of a grown woman pouring food on a child and ordering him out of a house he thought was his home. Concern had become a costume, and it was being worn with confidence. That's when the neutral eye entered the picture. A text came in from her uncle, the one I'd written to the day before. We'd never been close, but we'd always been cordial. He was the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. "I'm hearing things," he wrote. "They don't line up. I don't need details, but I don't buy the version going around." That was all. No promises, no allegiance. Just skepticism. It mattered more than he knew. By late afternoon, the pressure escalated. A new message from her. No greeting. "We've spoken to someone. This can get messy if you don't cooperate." Cooperate. That was the line. I sat down at the small desk by the window and stared out at the parking lot. Families loading suitcases, kids dragging new toys behind them. Christmas continuing without us. I thought about every time I'd swallowed my words to keep things smooth. Every time I'd told myself it was temporary. That being the reasonable one meant staying quiet. This wasn't misunderstanding anymore. It was orchestration. I walked back into the room and knelt beside my son. He looked up, eyes searching my face. "Are we okay?" he asked. "We are," I said. And this time, I meant it. I tucked him into bed early with his book and left the lamp on low. Then I stepped back into the hallway and made another call, brief, precise, unemotional, to the school counselor, just to give notice, just to document. Then one more, to the lawyer again. I didn't ask what to do. I told her what had happened. She listened, then said one sentence that locked everything into place. "If they're implying instability, the best thing you can do is control the record." I hung up and returned to the room, sat at the desk, opened my laptop. I didn't write a post. I didn't send a mass message. I didn't confront anyone. I gathered screenshots, timestamps, photos, the quiet pieces that tell the truth without commentary. Then I wrote one email, addressed it carefully. A small group, people who mattered, people whose opinions carried weight. No accusations, no insults, just facts. And one sentence at the end. "I'm sharing this, so there's no confusion later." I didn't hit send right away. I waited until the room was silent, until my son's breathing evened out, until I knew my hands were steady. When I finally clicked the button, there was no rush of adrenaline, no satisfaction, just resolve. By the time they realized what I was about to do, it was already too late to stop it. The moment the email left my outbox, I stood and walked away from the desk. I didn't need to watch it unfold. I poured a glass of water from the bathroom tap, lukewarm, slightly metallic, and sipped it slowly as I looked out through the thin hotel curtains. Cars were pulling into the lot below, headlights breaking the gray stillness of Christmas evening. A family in matching pajamas took a selfie near the entrance. Somewhere above them, a truth was landing. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled. It wasn't about winning. It was about not disappearing. My message had gone to only 5 people. No captions, no commentary, just facts, screenshots, timestamps, 3 brief paragraphs, and 1 closing line. This is not shared to retaliate, only to clarify. I'm committed to peace, but not to silence. I turned my phone face down again and returned to my son, still asleep, curled up with the stuffed dog he never used to need. I adjusted the blanket over him, careful not to wake him. Then I waited. 15 minutes passed slowly. At first, nothing. Just the buzz of the heater kicking on again. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't want to watch them flinch. But the shift was palpable. 10 minutes in, the group message where I'd been painted as emotionally unstable was suddenly quiet. One message disappeared, deleted by its sender. Another was edited from "we're worried about him" to "hoping for the best for everyone." 12 minutes in, I got a text from her. "Can we talk?" No greeting, no apology. I didn't respond. 14 minutes. A second message from her. "You made this so much worse than it had to be." And then, minute 15, the first phone call. Not from her, from her mother. I didn't answer. I let it ring, then watched the voicemail icon appear. Another followed from her father. Then a third, from someone I didn't expect. Her cousin, the one who'd liked every concerned post. I played that voicemail first. Her voice cracked halfway through. "I didn't know. I swear. I thought you were just having a hard time. But now, I don't know what to say." There it was. The first fracture. I sat back down, Not at the desk this time, but in the armchair across the room. My son stirred but didn't wake. His breathing evened back out. I let my eyes rest on him, memorizing the curve of his cheek, the way he gripped that stuffed animal like something precious. They had gambled that I would snap, that I'd yell, make a scene, lose my credibility. Instead, I'd left breadcrumbs in straight lines. And now the story they'd built on my silence was collapsing under the weight of evidence they hadn't counted on anyone seeing. Another message buzzed through, this one from her. You blindsided us. This is cruel. That word, cruel, nearly made me laugh. Quietly, bitterly. Cruel had been dumping mashed potatoes on a 6-year-old's Christmas sweater. Cruel had been telling him to leave the table like he wasn't family. What I did wasn't cruel. It was clean. They'd had every chance to speak truth, to back down, to make things right in private. But they wanted an audience. So I gave them one, not to humiliate, but to reveal. I didn't answer her message either. Later, another one came. The tone shifted again. Let's not do this like this. Can we please just talk? No drama? I closed my eyes for a moment. It was always the same cycle. Attack, deny, rewrite, then beg for the conversation they never allowed when they held the upper hand. But that time had passed. I waited another hour. I didn't refresh anything. I didn't chase responses. I didn't need them. Because the truth doesn't need applause to be real. Eventually, I sat down again, not to reply, but to draw a line. One final message, polite, lawful, firm. For all future communication regarding our son, please use email. I will not engage in personal disputes via text or calls. I hit send and blocked the numbers that didn't respect that boundary. Then I turned off notifications. The room felt quiet, but not empty. Later that night, as I folded my son's stained shirt into the hotel laundry bag, I understood the fight was over, but the healing wasn't. I set the folded shirt beside the others, the faint reddish stain still visible across the front. It didn't matter that I'd scrubbed it twice. It had set in early, too deep to erase completely. But I wasn't trying to erase it anymore. The room was still. The heater rumbled softly near the window. My son was asleep again, limbs stretched out across the edge of the mattress like he finally trusted the space to hold him. That small gesture, that looseness in his sleep, told me more than any words ever could. The noise was gone. No new messages, no missed calls, just quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence stretch. For the first time in what felt like weeks, I wasn't bracing for the next blow. There was nothing more to defend, no accusations to counter, no versions of me to untangle. It had ended cleanly, finally. Not with a bang, but with boundaries. My phone buzzed once more. Not a message, just a calendar notification. December 26th returned to routine. It almost made me smile. The truth was, I didn't know what routine would look like anymore, but I knew it wouldn't involve walking on eggshells or apologizing for protecting my child. I stood, stretched my legs, and reached for the last shirt still hanging over the heater. Warm, soft, his favorite one, with the worn-out soccer logo. As I folded it, I heard him stir. "Dad?" His voice was groggy. "Right here," I said, turning gently. He rubbed his eyes. "You still mad?" I sat down beside him. "No, buddy, I'm just tired." He looked at the folded clothes beside me, then at the one still in my hands. "That one still has the ketchup," he said quietly. "It does," I nodded. "It's not coming out." He blinked, thinking, "Can I still wear it?" "Of course," I said. "It's your shirt." He gave a small nod and settled back down, turning away. Then, after a pause, he said something I didn't expect. "I didn't do anything wrong, right?" That stopped me. I leaned forward, brushing his hair back gently. "No, you didn't. And if anyone ever made you feel like you did, that wasn't fair." He didn't say anything back, but his breath steadied again. And that was enough. After he fell back asleep, I returned to the chair near the window. There was a time, honestly, not that long ago, when I believed that love meant holding on, that if I just stayed patient, quiet, or forgiving enough, things would eventually return to what they once were. But now, sitting in that tiny room, surrounded by clothes that still smelled like someone else's house, I understood something I'd avoided for too long. Some things are not meant to be saved. Some relationships aren't broken. They're built wrong from the start. And when keeping them requires shrinking yourself, or worse, letting a child be shamed at a table he never asked to sit at, you're not preserving family. You're preserving dysfunction. The marriage wasn't salvageable, not because I didn't try, but because trying became a one-man job. She didn't throw punches, neither did her parents, but their words, soft, indirect, for your own good, landed just as hard. Their idea of family was rigid, performative. If you didn't fit, you were either dismissed or dressed up to look like you belonged. And I'd done that, played along, for far too long. I didn't hate them, but I couldn't keep pretending that peace meant pretending. That night, as the hours stretched toward morning, I made a quiet promise to myself, and to the boy sleeping in that bed. I would redefine what family meant, not by blood, not by name, but by safety, by kindness, by room to be yourself without punishment. He'd been taught enough about swallowing feelings. It was time he saw what it meant to set them free. I didn't post again. I didn't reach out. I didn't argue or explain. But I did start making plans. Plans that didn't involve going back. Not because I was angry, but because I was clear. I reached for my notebook, the one I'd used to track every date, every message, every interaction over the last few months, and turned to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, "What I chose to keep," and underneath, "My peace, my son's trust." The version of me that doesn't ask for permission to exist, I didn't list anything else. I didn't need to. The rest would sort itself out. Tomorrow, we'd leave the hotel. Maybe find something a little more permanent, a little less temporary. The paperwork would take time. The co-parenting logistics would be complicated, but I could handle it. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I wasn't doing it to prove a point. I was doing it so that next year, when my son sat down for Christmas dinner, he wouldn't be afraid of the silence or the people at the table. I looked over at him one more time before turning off the light. He'd shifted again, curled toward the wall this time, still gripping that stained shirt like it was the most valuable thing he owned. And maybe it was. A reminder that even when people try to cover up the truth, it leaves a mark. I didn't win that Christmas, but my son walked into the next one knowing he mattered, and that was everything.